this morning I woke early, and as I did Saturday morning, but the same thing happened. I woke and I thought, I don't want to give a Dharma talk. And so I thought about, so I felt a lot of sort of doubt. And so I'm going to give a talk on resistance. Well, now, there's a little bit of a paradox there, isn't it? So I'm going to I'm resisting giving a talk on resistance. And so I thought, well, the thing that I'm just going to get out of bed. This is not going to work if I lie here and just, so I thought I'll have some breakfast. So I sat up and my feet were on the floor. My body was in the bed, my feet were on the floor, right on the edge of the bed. And then all of a sudden, my mind just started slipping into a meditative state. When's the last time that happened to you? It's a wonderful thing. I think it can happen when you have been sitting for 40 years. And it happened yesterday morning also. It was just, no plan, and I'm sitting there with my feet on the floor and my butt on the bed, and the mind just started going into a very quiet, still place. And so that lasted maybe it was like close to maybe 30 minutes, and it was just lovely. And so then the resistance went away, and I got up and made my breakfast. So one thing that I remembered after I was kind of sitting and looking at that resistance, I had the thought, what do I have to give other people in a talk? That was the doubt that I was feeling in the morning before, as I was waking up, the doubt of what do I have to give in a Dharma talk? And so as I've thought about that later, so I've been thinking for many, many, many weeks how words are not capable of expressing meaning, not true meaning, not deep meaning, not what is really important to us. Words can never convey that to us. And I think that as I've approached certain ages, I have become more and more aware of it, that what we try to convey in terms of meaning is words are so puny. And it reminded me of that the Buddha said, he had this wonderful analogy of a finger pointing towards the moon. And those of you, I'm sure, who come are Zen, Jokai and Tim, who are both Zen teachers, particularly, I'm sure you've heard that quote. But the quote is, don't confuse the finger for the moon. The finger are the words. And the words very often just completely prevent us from really seeing the moon. The moon is, what is the moon? That's a metaphor. Many people say the moon represents enlightenment. And so I have this poem by Rilke that I want to share with you right now, which was kind of like really expresses what I was feeling about the futility of my throwing some words at you right now today. So I'm going to read you something that is words that is I think that Christine has heard this, and well, you both have heard this. This is one of my favorite poems, and I'm going to just kind of tell you before we end that I'm going to read. I'll read the words that I most have loved recently when I finish this talk. So this is called The Journey, and it's words, but they do convey meaning. One day you finally knew what you had to do, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations through their melancholy, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own. That voice that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. The only life you could save. So I would not presume to add to Mary Oliver, but I almost wish she would have said, the only life you can change. Because that's the only way we can save ourselves, is to change who we are. And it occurred to me as I was thinking about rewriting Mary Oliver, which I would never, she's so beautiful. But isn't it true that we are really interested in changing others? You go to a PTA meeting, right? The parents of children in school, right? And oh my God, right? I mean, there's one side that wants to control the children and the other side that wants to control. And so, we want to change what's bad in everybody except ourselves. It's amazing. How many people want to change themselves? So you ask yourself, or I would invite you to ask, and this is kind of like about resistance. Do I want to change? Ask yourself that. Do I want to change? What do you think Donald Trump would say? What do you think Joe Biden would say? What's the difference? How many people truly think they need to change? I mean, for me, on a trip of 3 weeks, it was amazing to observe people that I love, and some want to change and some don't want to change. So that brings us to the little blurb that I had, that was in the Sunday, was in the newsletter, which I think is almost terrible. It's another poet. Poets are the very few people in the world who say something worth listening to, you know. And this, of course, is Auden, and this is, if you read the newsletter, this was what we put in. But I do think it's almost terrible to really let yourself feel what he said. We would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. Woo. I first read that probably 25 years ago, and I don't think I have ever gotten over just that. It's just so in your face, right? We would rather be ruined than changed. So, I'm going to read one little thing about illusions, which I love, and then I'm going to tell you about a limpet. Who knows what a limpet is? Andrew, do you know what a limpet is? I thought you might. Does anyone know what a limpet is? All right, so we'll get to that in just a minute, but I'm going to read, again, a very famous quote, and it's wonderful. This is Kalu Rinpoche, who was a wonderful Tibetan teacher. Remember the poem I just read, right? Rather than climbing the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. So what are our illusions that we cling to with such tenacity? So here's what Kalu Rinpoche said: we live in illusion and the appearance of things. The next sentence is truly wonderful. There is a reality. We are that reality. When you understand this, you see that you are nothing. And being nothing, you see that you are everything. And then he says, that is all. I guess maybe he says that's all you need to know, right? Well, so it's very difficult to hold on to that idea that that reality shows us that we're nothing, and that in experiencing that we're nothing, we see that we're everything. Which brings me almost to the limpet. I guess I would just say, put in there that this is probably the core teaching of Buddhism. That the core teaching of the Buddha would be that what we cling to most is this illusion that there is this little self inside that's operating the whole show, right? So when we were sitting, I invited you to see if you could watch the body breathing as opposed to this self thinking, I am breathing. That separates, as I say, maybe say the men from the boys or the girls from the ladies, I don't know. It separates that. I mean, that's an astonishingly difficult thing, to have this ability to be watching without thinking I am controlling it, or the need to control it. So this one is pretty awful also. This is written by someone named Evelyn Underhill, and I'm going to bet that no one in here, oh, wow. You know what, I was going to say, yeah, she's an amazing woman. English, and I think 1875, she died just at the end of just at the beginning of World War I. And she was a mystic and quite devout Christian, and I hesitate, her spiritual development increased throughout her life and became increasingly more sophisticated and I think quite amazing. But this is something I'm pretty sure you haven't heard this one. Well, we'll see. This is about the limpet. So a limpet is a small aquatic shell that is, with a shell. It's a snail. I'm sorry. It's a small aquatic snail with a shell, and it grasps the rock, right? And I understand, as I was reading about it, that its tongue is the strongest thing in all biology. In all biology. Why? Because its tongue grasps the algae on the rock. So, if you have a tongue and that has to just constantly rub against a rock, it's going to have to be pretty damn strong, isn't it? So anyway, it lives on the algae, and when a wave comes in, it has the ability, it will float off a rock and grasp to another rock, but it stays on that rock. This is what she said about it. Well, I'm going to start. It will start with a word that I have never heard. I have been reading Mr. Carl Jung for most of my life, and as you all know, I think he's absolutely wonderful. But this I've never read. She says, the surface self. I've never heard that. Has anyone ever heard the surface? It's got a hyphen. The surface self. Now, we will in Jungian work, we will talk about the ego, which is the sort of the center of consciousness, according to Jung. Some people disagree with that. And then there is always the idea of the larger self, the capital S. But anyway, back to the surface self. I just had to give you that little info. See, my words are blocking everything. The surface self, left for so long in undisputed possession of the conscious field, has grown strong and cemented itself like a limpet to the rock of the obvious. Building up from a selection amongst the more concrete elements offered it by the rich stream of life, a defensive shell of fixed ideas. It is useless to speak kindly of the limpet. You must detach it by main force. That old, comfortable, clinging life protected by its hard shell from the living waters of the sea must now come to an end. Ooh. I don't think there's a force that can pull that limpet off the rock. Unfortunately, but this is the resistance that we are talking about. There is something about us that so clings to the illusions, the fixed ideas, as she calls it, and resist being pulled away. And so if I were a limpet and you pulled me away from a rock, I would be pretty upset, right? So it's totally understandable why it, again, it has a suction foot that holds onto the rock while it's licking it with its tongue. So it occurs to me that limpet represents something that is absolutely programmed in our DNA, a resistance to being pulled into what you may call the sea of life. And that's helpful to me to think about it, that it's kind of like a totally natural thing to resist. It's not like, to make it like bad, I think it's programmed into us. And so I think it's very important to look at it with understanding and to say this is resistance, right? And not really necessarily make it a pejorative thing. It's a survival mechanism, a survival instinct. The other thing that causes incredible resistance in us, number one is psychology. The baby in us is freaked out by reality. I truly believe that. Not even the little girl, not even the little boy. They have a hard time too, let's face it. The other thing is what the Buddhists called Avidyā, which if you really study, I think that I'm going to maybe give a course on the 12 Nidanas. According to the Buddha, you all know that suffering is caused by clinging, and we know that stuff, right? So we know that feeling, that desire comes from feeling. But let's go back to the creation of consciousness. That consciousness, where it comes from, according to Buddhism, the very consciousness that enters the womb, your consciousness and my consciousness, comes from something that he called karma formations. In other words, the memory of all of the karma in our history, maybe thousands of years back. But there's something that that karma comes out of. And this is what the Buddha teaches, and he called it delusion, avidyā, ignorance. This is not good news, but this is the other part of our resistance, that there is, from the beginning, there's consciousness and intelligence that's in our core, but it was stamped from the factory, an element of delusion. And that delusion is that says, I am breathing. It's so hard to get away from that. I am breathing. You can't convince me that that's not true. Oh yes, I know my body's breathing, but I am breathing. I am seeing. I am touching. This is, according to Buddhism, the other side of this resistance to reality. Do you understand? So the psychological resistance, but there is that other thing, and I struggle with this, but I don't want to believe this. I don't want to believe that we were stamped. You know, at the factory, the guy was sitting there and he stamped delusion. I don't like it. But if that's true, and of course, unfortunately, the Buddha said it's true. You know, I mean, if we disagree, we are disagreeing with a rather large authority. But if it's true, the best we can do is to recognize, to try to be aware that there is that shadow quality in us of attachment to this idea of I am everything. But Kalu Rinpoche said, it first comes from realizing that I am nothing. And from that, then you can really experience the totality of what you are. I'm going to close with this, my favorite quote. It says, wonderful, and I have ever read in my life, and some of you have heard me, I've been talking about it. It's called The Matter with Things. And it's by Ian McGilchrist. So here's his quote. We are temporarily material entities. I love that. We're temporarily material entities. Now, he's already said that we come from, the sentence before that was, he said that we come from the original consciousness. So we're not just material entities. We come from, he says that he calls it the original consciousness. But anyway, he says we are material entities capable, we do not know how or why, not just of all before creation, but of playing a part in creation itself. Beings that emerge out of the original consciousness, eddies in a seamless flow that embraces everything that is and was and will be. That seamless flow, I think, is his description of reality. You could say that reality is that seamless flow of the original consciousness, which I simply love. And it's not often that you're going to see anybody dare to try to define reality. So anyway, the eddies, it finds itself, wherever this being finds itself in that seamless flow of reality. We are embedded in the cosmos that gives rise to us. I love that. You know, what gives rise to us? The universe. We are from the universe, the cosmos. In the least that can logically be said is that there is something about this cosmos that makes it such that we and all our capabilities, all our achievements and creations, for good or ill, can arise. They simply cannot come from anywhere other than the cosmos in which we belong. Where else could we come from? Anybody got an idea? We come from the cosmos, of course, from which we belong. What is wonderful about us is not our pitiful lust or for power or our lust for self-absorption. I am breathing. And our armor-plated invulnerability. Think about that limpet, right, with its shell. What's wonderful about us, I'm going to repeat that, is not our pitiful lust for power or self-absorption and our armor-plated invulnerability, but precisely are you ready? Our capacity to be vulnerable, to wonder, and to love. Shall I repeat that? I think that those are words to inspire every single person. What is wonderful about us is not our pitiful lust for power, our self-absorption, and our armor-plated vulnerability, but precisely our capacity to be vulnerable, to wonder, and to love, which alone makes what is most valuable possible. So that's Ian McGilchrist on page 2052. And with that, I bid you a fond and thank you so much for hanging in there with me.